You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi everybody and welcome back to the show. You're listening to episode number 190 of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Today's main interview is with a couple of people who are definitely not going through a midlife crisis. They are Sahada Buckley and Luke Runels, or Cloud and Leaf. You may remember Sahada, or Cloud. She's a young woman who I chanced upon at the top of a mountain quite early in my hike, in heavy cloud, and she very obligingly gave me one of the very best early moments on the trail with a rendition of a ballad on a violin, entirely made up on the spot. It was eerily beautiful, and I always wanted to hear from her and her boyfriend again. The two of them really hiked their own hike, so much so that they often went radio silent, and several times I heard from Sahada's dad, Ralph, as he inquired if I knew where his daughter was. But as you're going to hear, Sahada and Luke were really letting the trail come to them and experiencing it in exactly the way they wanted to. Cloud and Leaf will be on soon. I haven't decided upon what we're going to do with our middle section from now on, as we've caught up with all the Mighty Blue class of 2019. So I took the opportunity this week to have a quick chat with Julie Jester Gayheart, the awesome host of our brand new show that's designed especially for section hikers. It's called Jester Section Hiker, and Julie has some great news to share. Julie will be on after Cloud and Leaf. Finally, Paul Stutzman. Having pushed his way through the Smokies last week, he's on his way to Hot Springs and a bike ride, which brought to mind a fateful bike ride from his childhood. So let's get on with it then. Here's Sahada Buckley and Luke Runels, or Cloud and Leaf. The sound isn't perfect, but our conversation was so good that I don't think you're going to worry about that. Here's Cloud and Leaf. Okay, well, the last time we met today's guests was very early on the trail. This is Sahada Buckley and Luke Runels. Hi, guys. How are you?
Hi.
Hey.
Hey, well, now you are Cloud and Leaf. Tell us first of all how you got Cloud and Leaf. Did you give each other names before you started, or was it something given to you when you were out there?
He always wanted to be Leaf. So.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Why do you want to be a Leaf then?
Well, I didn't really know that people were supposed to name you, and I just kind of was thinking about what I would want my trail name to be. And my name is Luke, and I just knew like Leaf would be easy.
An easy transition.
And kind of like a woods name. So.
But there was actually a guy that you may have met that started, I guess, either the same day that we started or the day before. His name was Mark, and he went by Chia, and he also went by Gatorade. But anyway, he named me Cloud because I was playing violin on top of a mountain in the clouds. And so I was like, I guess that'll work. And then once you're kind of named, it kind of takes off, you know.
Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny how you grow into your name? You know, yeah. I get called Mighty Blue all the time. I'm not in the least bit mighty, and I rarely wear blue. So I'm kind of surprised. Everybody still calls me Mighty Blue who met me on the trail, and you are definitely in my mind as Cloud and Leaf, not Sahada and Luke. It's like, do you think it's important? And I certainly felt it was. You can reinvent yourself out in the woods, can't you? Did you think that was part of the trip for you?
Actually, it was funny because when I got back, all I wanted to do was introduce myself as Cloud. Partly it was like a superficial thing because telling everybody my name's Sahada, I kind of have to repeat it a couple of times. And then when I was Cloud, it was just like, oh, okay, Cloud. I'll remember that. Easy enough.
Yeah.
And it also just allowed me to float.
Well, funny enough, you say somebody named you Cloud because we'd actually met once before, and you reminded me yesterday we met. I couldn't remember the name of the place. A place called Justice Creek, and I just crossed some water, and I think some Koreans were following me as well. And then you were around. You two were around, and you were camping there, and that was when I first realized how you were really, not so much trying to stay away, but you were trying to get that solitude in the woods. How early on did you start doing that, just being by yourselves in the woods?
Immediately.
We didn't realize that people stayed at shelters.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we didn't know that much.
Yeah.
We didn't do that much research because I didn't want to have like a lot of expectations, I guess. I just kind of wanted to figure it out. So we did pretty good with our gear, though.
Amazingly well with our gear somehow.
Yeah, our shakedown at Neil's Gap was like, all right, you could maybe like cut your toothbrush in half.
Oh, really?
But I remember we passed Hawk Mountain Shelter, and that was on our second day and so we were like, I guess let's go over there and just see what it's like. There's probably nobody over there. Like, why would anybody be over there? And we go over there and there's like 30, 35 people. And we're like, where did these people, like, who are they? Are they thru hikers? What's going on? And that's when we met Mark. And honestly, I think I saw you there camping there. But
I was at Hawk Mountain. That day. I remember I was, yeah. And it's funny, you say you got your gear right, because it's not easy to get your gear right, is it? Because you learn a lot on the trail when you realize what you need. What did you do if you said you didn't do much research and yet you worked out your gear?
I went to Google and I typed in AT thru hiking gear, and it gave me a couple different lists, and I just sort of read each of them and kind of personalized it.
We actually got our tent. We went to this
that was like nice.
Very minimal, but also really good. But it had a lot of like fashionable.
It's a college hiking store, so a lot of it's very day hiking.
Right.
But they had like a North Face. We had a North Face Triarch too, and it was just the floor model, and we got it, and it ended up being the best thing.
You seem so comfortable in your, so confident in what you were doing. So you say you didn't really research it much. So what was the idea of not researching it because you wanted to experience it entirely new or not know what to expect?
I think I was under the impression that I had researched it enough.
But I think we were kind of on different pages there. I had a friend that did it in college. He did it like in 3 separate sections. I just kind of knew, I don't know, somehow I got the impression that it was just very doable. And so I guess I didn't really want to know much. And I knew we could do it, and that's all I needed to know, I guess.
Yeah.
That's amazing you would think that, though, because it is a very physical trail. Or did you not find the physicality difficult at all?
It was, yeah.
All right.
I think once we got used to it, though, I felt like the first 8 weeks probably was really brutal. But I just knew, like, as long as we didn't get hurt, it would sort of normalize, and then it would be all good.
I remember the first time that we really just sat down and looked at each other and felt somewhat defeated. It was actually at the Maine border, and we sat down at the sign at the border, and we both looked at each other, and we were like, this is really hard. This is it just hit me all of a sudden. I was like, and it took that long, literally, because we were just so enchanted by just like walking all day. No, even though it was hard, but it was just so much fun, and the people that we were meeting was so much fun. And then we got to after the whites, we were like, all right, we have to start really moving. And that's when we sat down and we were like, this is hard. Like, even though we're exhausted, the hardest thing is you're exhausted and you're hungry and you're hurting and you have to keep moving. So
yeah, it really is. But it took you 2,000 miles to realize that. It took me about 5 minutes to realize it when I did it. So you were enjoying the hike itself for the hike. I mean, are you hikers, or were you hikers before this?
No. He's an avid walker.
Right.
I've pretty much walked like an hour a day every day for, I don't know, it's like 15 or 16. And I've always tried to get in the woods a lot, but never any sort of enduro hiking like that.
I think that we just romanticized it so much that it was just,
Yes.
we just made it how we wanted it to be.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of difference between this and a walk, though. I did the Camino de Santiago in Spain last year, and that was a walk.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is definitely different. And did you find those differences straight away?
I felt like initially there was just no pressure to like make the difference. It was just like, let's get down the trail every day.
Right.
And because I don't know, it didn't matter between the weight and just being like sore as hell day in and day out. It was like, why would we try any harder? But later, especially when the terrain started to flatten out and we got like more used to things, then it started to be like, okay, there's a difference between like hiking and walking in the woods. And honestly, we would just kind of oscillate like between those two pretty much the entire way until somewhere in New Hampshire, like even 1,200 miles in, we'd still be like, all right, today let's just walk in the woods. Let's not like do the hiking.
Yeah. That's such a. I mean, I couldn't approach it that way. For me, it was a life or death. Whether I could keep moving forward at all. But with you were just kind of treating it as a walk. It sounds to me like you let the trail come to you more than you pushing yourself to get those miles done. Did you start a day with an end goal in mind, or did you just say, right, here we go, and let's get moving?
We kind of diverged on that. She's pretty into planning, and I'm pretty into not planning.
I loved my guidebook. I would just look at it, and I would just be like, "Oh, look, there's a grocery store," and like I would be like, "Oh, in 8 miles, there's a ice cream stand. If we get there by 2 p.m., we can eat ice cream."
Oh, cool.
Or, something like that. And then he would be like,
yeah, she had the map on her phone, and she had the.
But we didn't have gut hooks. We were really adamant about not having gut hooks.
Yeah.
Why?
Because for me personally, I would have, once I had gut hooks, it would have been like a drug. I would have been just so, it would have been too much,
Yeah, it's like the answers in the back of the book. Like, if you have the answers there, you're gonna check them. And the other thing is, it's just the AT. Like, I guess my idea of it was that there's too many smartphones. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like it was we get away from that out there.
I can see how you feel about that, and I do understand. But I must admit, for me, gut hooks was critical. I needed to know where I was, and I needed, I needed to have some sort of planning for the end of the day. So you were just pretty much relaxed. So, and the good thing for your hike, of course, you weren't looking to get to a shelter every night. So because of that, you literally could stop whenever you wanted to stop. Did you kind of tend to agree when it was time to stop?
Well, it was water. So we would just look for where water was.
All right.
We didn't really agree on times to stop. It went back and forth. Like, I had the tendency of being like planning kind of in my brain or out loud in the morning, hey, we should go this far, because we also plan based off of resupplies and stuff like that. So, and then we would get to some really beautiful place. Maybe it was 7 to 10 miles in, and we were trying to go like 15 or so. And and he was always the one that was like, this is too beautiful. Like, we are here right now, and the place in the future or wherever we are planning to be is probably not going to be more beautiful than this right now. And so then we would stop, but it was always kind of like this tug for me that was, keep moving, keep accomplishing these miles.
Yeah. Well, it is a lot of miles. And you started about the same time as me, I think the day before me, and you finished in October. So you still, if you were going to complete this trip, you still had to get 2,200 miles done in 7 months, didn't you, really? I mean, you still had to do those miles.
Yeah.
I mean, because was that important, or was it not important to you to finish?
It was, yeah. It was
important.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And how did, actually, the very first question I was going to actually ask was to remind people where we met you before, but I haven't even got to that question yet because we've got on different tangents, which I'm very happy to do, obviously. Because you talked about resupply. Was the planning you were doing? Were you just resupplying in town, or were you getting stuff sent to you?
Mostly resupplying in town. Every once in a while, we didn't have any pre-made boxes, but we just kind of built like an Amazon drop box and sent it somewhere.
Yeah, my dad was really.
That's pretty helpful.
Yeah,
that is pretty helpful. Yeah, it is. And I was going to tell people that we actually met again, and this is how you may have heard Cloud before, because you mentioned you got your name from playing the violin at the top of a mountain in a cloud. Well, that's exactly when I saw you, wasn't it? And you played the violin on the cloud.
Yeah,
and
I think that was the next day we saw you the next morning. And I think Mark must have passed you too, or he showed up, I think, right after you left.
Yeah.
Oh, right, I see. Okay, and so was that part of being by yourself? Because I seem to remember someone saying, maybe it was you guys said it, you wanted to play your music when you were in the woods. Was that an important part of it for you?
Yeah.
It ended up not being quite as romantic as we had hoped. We had to find a middle ground, like the workload to do the whole thing.
Sure.
It took a lot more persistence, but
in terms
it was still a big part of it, I would say.
In terms of like playing music, though, because Leaf's a musician too, and that was definitely a thought. Like for me, it wasn't even like I don't like to bother people, especially when they're trying to be like in the woods and in their own heads and whatever. But also, I don't like for people to listen to me when I'm practicing. So I thought,
oh, really?
Yeah. So I thought that bringing my violin out there was actually going to be a very internal affair. And it would just kind of be like, oh, yeah, I have my violin on my back and I'll just stop wherever and practice a little bit. And it was like that at some points, but there were so many people almost all the time, like all the way up the trail, that it was actually really rare for me to find a place that I could just sit for like an hour without interacting with somebody, which I was not expecting at all.
Yeah, because you guys definitely exemplified hiking your own hike, and that is one of the mantras, I guess, of the trail. And was that always, as soon as you got on the trail, was that your intention? Were you expecting so much solitude, or were you surprised by the amount of people who are out there?
Really surprised by the amount of people I was.
Do you not like that or not?
No, I thought that was one of the best parts of the trail, actually.
Oh, right. Okay, good. So, I mean, you did interact with people. A number of people said they'd seen you, because I started to get ahead of you, which was not so much worrying me a bit, but anytime I can pass anybody who's younger than me or get ahead of anybody who's younger than me, there's got to be something wrong with that person. They got me slowing down. And now I know that you spent more than quite a few zero days, and you got off the trail once or twice. And hikers often take the opportunity to go into Washington and to New York City, but you guys really made a vacation about it. First of all, tell us about Washington, because New York is amazing, by the way.
Well, we took the train from Harpers Ferry into Washington and stayed with my brother for a week, and that was amazing. We intersected with the Washington, D.C. Jazz Festival, which he's a jazz musician, a drummer.
Yeah, that's an important distinction here, I would say, just like an underlying theme of our chemistry out there, is that she's a classical violinist from age 7, and I'm a jazz drummer. And so the whole she would wake me up hype as shit with guidebook in hand.
I was just excited.
And I just and no plan. Don't look at the map. Let's just figure it out and see what we come up on.
I don't think he would have had a guidebook if I was. I don't think he would have had one at all, if I had been there. But
well, that's interesting. Would you think your hikes would have been different had you gone separately?
Yeah, for sure.
I think I would have. I'm really thankful that we hiked together, because
I'm sure
I would have just hiked. I don't know how much. I would have had adventures and stuff, but I mean, going into DC, we spent a long time there just doing, and at his, he was like, we need a week there, like we were halfway through, our bodies need to rest, we have a place to stay, it's a cool place to be. And then the same thing with going into New York City. It was actually my idea, though, to take the long path, which was, I think, unexpected. Our other friend Galileo also took the long path with us.
Tell us about that. I'd never even heard of that. So you got to where, and when did you start heading into New York, and which route did you take?
It was in Harriman State Park.
Yep, Harriman State. I remember that well, yeah.
Yeah, it was like 2 or 3 days after the New York-New Jersey line, and the day you crossed into New Jersey, it's probably like 5 miles into New Jersey. You got New York. You got up on it was like the highest peak in New York, and it wasn't actually that high, but you could see the city skyline.
That's right. Yeah, I remember it well. Yeah.
And we were like, we could walk there. It was way off, but it was like, given what we've done so far, we could totally walk there, and we kind of laughed about it. And then
we intersected a trail called the Long Path.
Yeah, it was like a day later, I think.
And that goes from the 177th subway station, I don't know how many miles, like a couple hundred miles out into the Catskills.
Yeah, it's like 300 or 400.
And it goes like across the George Washington Bridge. So it's like 50 miles to the AT.
Wow.
It's really interesting because you just go. It was definitely one of my favorite things that we did, because it starts off in that particular section of New York is like these really, it's just very meadowy.
Yeah.
And it's kind of wet too.
It was very wet. Sometimes you're like coming out and just walking in the median of like an interstate at points, like the closer that you get to.
Sure, I'm sure.
Yeah, it becomes very suburban, but also you just find these pockets of like city parks that are actually really wooded. And
nice.
Well, they're not.
So
they're not city parks. They're just like little state parks.
Yeah, like woods
that are protected.
Yeah. So you got into the city. You got into New York across the GWB.
No, we went down the Palisades, and then his mom met us. She was staying on the New Jersey side, so we took an Uber.
Yeah, she called. We Ubered. She called, and she was like, she had been waiting there. She was getting antsy. So
she was like, "Why are you guys still walking?" We're like, "You don't know anymore, I guess." So we just took an Uber.
Actually, before we took Uber, though, this woman, she just face planted on this rock and was like bleeding, and we just came up on her needing help, and so a bunch of cops came out, and it was weird.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's a really cool thing to actually walk into New York from there, and I never even knew you could do it. So that was lovely. I think that was great that you did that. But as you had those 2 big trips, how were you able to manage your trail budget? Because it's not cheap to stay in New York, is it? And did you economize when you're actually in the woods, or were you going into town a lot to spend time in town as well when you were hiking? Because budget's a big part of this, isn't it, really, for everybody?
Well, I put my whole New York trip on my credit card.
Oh my God! All right. I didn't know that.
I'm paying that off.
Excellent idea. Excellent idea.
But I went to town on it. We had great coffee, and I went to as many shows as we could, and went to all the museums. It was great.
Good for you. Good for you.
We stayed with my friend, and I was not. I didn't do that really. But he had more. He went to more shows and stuff, and I spent more time with my friends. So, but. I mean, I don't know. I guess it all just comes down to like if you have a free place to stay or not, because that's the biggest thing. We wouldn't have gone to either place, I don't think, if we didn't have a place to stay.
Yeah, because it's certainly not the cheapest place to be in New York City, having lived there for 3 years myself. So I kind of know what that's like. And how did you manage your budget? Was it did you spend more than you expected to spend on the trip?
Spent about as
what
much.
we expected.
Yeah.
I think we both just went out with like.
Yeah.
I figured I'd spend $5,000 to $6,000, and that's about what we came out to.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. So, but how did you first come to the trail? You say you weren't prepared. Was this something that you came to as a couple? You decided you want to go on the trail, or was this something that both of you wanted to do for some time?
It was an independent thing for sure.
Yeah, she lived in Athens. This is where she went to school, which is a mile south of the beginning.
An hour south.
Or
All right.
So, and like I said, I had that friend. I mean, I had heard about it, and then that friend kind of was like, he didn't say much. He was just like, "You'd like it," and it just made it like a reality. It's something I could do, and so I think that was a big difference between us. Is that she had, I don't think she had like really specific expectations for the trail.
Right.
I think it was like, this is an awesome thing to do, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it.
And does it feel awesome having done it?
Yes, I don't think it's really hit yet that we did it. Actually, yesterday I was just looking for a certain picture on my phone, and I just
Right.
scrolled past a picture with me with my backpack on, and I just thought for a second, I was like, that thing looks so heavy. Did I carry that for 7 months? Like, just for a second, I just looked at it and it seems so natural, like there's my backpack, it goes on my back, but it's it's slowly just like hitting that was a big thing to do.
Yeah, and it really is. But don't you think, though, you get into a rhythm? Whatever your rhythm you need to get into, you do get into it when you're on that hike and you start moving. Your backpack almost becomes part of you anyway, doesn't it? It's just kind of who you are. Your backpack, your tent, and all those things are part of who you are.
Yeah, there's a really weird kind of like conditioning that I noticed the backpack had, which is like waking up and like the backpack, you just learn that you need to move if you have it on. So
Oh yeah,
wake up and just hobbling, like I definitely probably got some mild like nerve damage in my lower back after everything because I mean, once I got so far, it was like, all right, I'm just gonna finish this. But
sure.
I don't know, it's been pretty painful since. But it would just be like under any other conditions, it would make no sense to keep moving. But I'd like put the backpack on and then it'd be like, okay, well, I guess this is fine. I guess I can keep moving today.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Did you get injured, you two? Did you have any bad falls or any injuries that were potentially hike threatening?
I had one fall right before Stratton, which is like we literally looked at the 2,000-mile, rock
No.
marker.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and going down the Stratton is the most gradual downhill. Like, you could jog it. It's not even a big deal. And I guess I was just not paying attention and I landed on my foot weird and I thought I was broken. I just started crying. It hurt so badly and I really did.
Good.
I thought I was it just kind of hit me all at once and in an irrational way, but I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's broken. I'm done. This is it." And it wasn't broken, but we did have to get off the trail for like we slacked packed and we zeroed for a day, but
that wasn't unusual for you, though, was it? Zeroing for a couple of days.
no.
So you're okay with that, yeah.
At that point, we were like really, we had goals and we were trying to get done. So it was actually that was the only zero that we both kind of were like, do we need this? But we did.
Oh, right. Wow. Now, Cloud, I know you know this already, but your dad, Ralph, was a little bit concerned about you from time to time, and he contacted me. Did you often spend times of radio silence, or did you just? I mean, not. I'm sure it wasn't deliberate not to contact him, but did you just hang out by yourselves and not really want to get in contact with people?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, don't do that. Well, don't do that again because he really wanted to hear from you. You know that, don't you?
I think I'm gonna get back, and my dad's gonna have a full head of gray hair. He was and he's definitely your biggest fan now because I feel like he just listened to your podcast and just was like, all right, this is what my daughter's doing right now. I think maybe I don't know. And,
I think he was hoping for news of you.
Yeah, or just it was a really good thing for him because he just like was able to connect to what we were doing and but yeah, we didn't really turn on our phones that often. In fact, the first all the way to Harper's Ferry, I don't think we turned on our phones, but when we were in town, actually, because I
Oh
still
my
had to work
gosh.
at that point.
I guess the whole thing was really like an experiment, but I think we're both people who are just like listening to music all the time.
Sure.
And I kind of had this feeling that just like having less input for a really long time would sort of change what it felt like. And doing that for the first half of the trip really was pretty interesting, because then like when we would hear music, I don't know, it'd just be like a lot bigger and more intense.
Yeah.
I'm sure. It's one of the things I've said since I've been back, and I hadn't noticed it when I did the hike 5 years ago, was how few distractions there are when you're hiking. Now I've come back to so-called real life. I'm just distracted the whole time. And in hiking, you either walk or you don't walk. I mean, that's it. It's a binary choice. And if you don't walk, you're not going to get anywhere. So, back in so-called real life, you've got all these things distracting you all the time. And having that ability to be in the woods and not be distracted, I think is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because that's probably just how people were for a long time. It's just that
I'm sure.
little input. They're probably a lot more sensitive to any sort of entertainment or whatever.
Sure. So now, I mentioned yesterday when we spoke that I lost 50 pounds in weight, but both of you had an entirely different outcome, didn't you? You actually both put on weight. How'd you do that?
Well,
we're just kind of scrawny, I guess.
We're a little people, and we gained muscle mass early on, and maybe like 5 pounds or so of muscle mass, probably.
Yeah, but I gained like 10 pounds.
Did you gain 10?
Yeah, something like that.
Oh my gosh. But I think the fact that we've been living on hiking food caught up to us. And
all right.
Because I came back to about what I started at the end.
Wow. That's just amazing to me. I don't know any guy who's come back with the same sort of weight. Did you get the hiker? Did you get the hiker hunger when you were out there? Were you eating incessantly?
I think we got normal hunger. I think we haven't eaten enough as people, and I don't know. I think it was probably good for our appetites.
Yeah.
Cool. So tell us about your Katahdin day, because you spent, was it 7.5 months, 7 and a bit months on the trail? Yeah. What were you feeling as you took on the mountain, and how was it once you got there? Were you relieved it was over? Were you sad it was over? How did you feel?
Ooh, that's kind of hard.
I felt like a total bittersweet feeling.
Uh-huh.
I felt like weirdly numb. I just kind of sat up there, and we waited. So the last like 45 miles we dragged out to get the best day. So there was one day that was going to be really beautiful, and everybody that we met within like those 45 miles was saying that they were going to wait until this day. So when we got up there were probably like 25 people up there.
Oh, right.
And everybody was like celebrating. And have you heard of the boot challenge or something? It's
the boot challenge.
It's horrible. It's really horrible. But
God.
You're supposed to get to Katahdin, and then you take your hiking boot and pour a beer into it, and you have to chug it. So people were doing that up there, and it was just like a total party, like celebration. And I felt really disconnected from that, actually. Maybe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe.
Why?
They were like a whole family too.
Yeah, they were really been together a long time. And
yeah,
there was kind of some dwarf planets revolving around them.
We were dwarf planets.
Did you not get involved with the trial family at all? Was it always just the two of you?
We did, but we were some of the first to start, unless you're really extreme, and then we were some of the last to finish. So I think probably the people that we got, with two exceptions, the people that we got closest to, when we lost them around Shenandoah, and then they all ended up finishing, in August or a little into September.
And then two of our friends finished on October 20th.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We were with them for so long.
Yeah.
And
they were like us. They were amazing. Amazing.
No, they were on a different level.
They were amazing chillers,
Being chilled out. I mean, you've certainly defined it for me. I tell you that you seem to have had such a nice, relaxing way to do it. And did this journey instill in you some sort of desire to do more like this, or is this going to be a one and done for you, or can you see yourself doing something along the same lines?
No, I'm so excited. I'm so excited that I didn't there's just a whole world that we're just a part of now.
Yeah.
I didn't realize. I'm just so excited to do. I think my next thing will be the long trail.
All right.
Vermont was just so nice, but I mean, there's just an endless amount of things that you can hike.
There really are, but there is such a thing as going to work as well and getting the money to pay for it sometimes,
Yeah. Well, that's another thing I learned on the trail. That kind of stuff, it comes, it comes if you look for it. And if you want to work half the year and travel half the year, that's not like a wild dream or fantasy. And you can find a lot of work that makes that happen. So
I agree. And that's definitely something I've noticed from the young. I say youngster sounds terribly patronising. I don't mean to do that. Anybody who's younger than 50, as far as I'm concerned, is a youngster. So, but to have met so many people for whom a career and a full-time job and that isn't that important to them. My generation was absolutely critical for us to be that way. I envy your generation this wonderful ability to be able to say, yeah, I can work for 4 or 5, 6 months. I learn enough money. I can then go and do what I want to do. And I think that is so the way life should be. I really do. So I admire you for doing that, I must say.
Thanks.
So no, I promise you, I've said this to so many people, how the attitude of your generation is so much healthier than my generation when it comes to that sort of thing. I just admire the fact you can do that. And if you were to do it again, if you were crazy enough to do it again, like I was, would you change any aspects of your hike, or was this pretty much how you wanted it to be and it panned out the way you wanted it?
I think that both of us would actually do it alone if we did it again, not because we didn't enjoy doing it together, but I don't think that we realized how centered on like us working as a team. That might seem like silly to say, but it seems like you're going into the woods, you would have like a lot of time to just like reflect and work on yourself, which we did, but there was a lot of time that you had to just spend on working together.
How interesting. I never would have said you'd respond that way. I'm really, do you feel the same way, Luke?
Yeah, it was, I think, especially the fact that we going into it, it was like we had started talking again. We hadn't been in like regular contact for about a year. And then it kind of came up. I was like, I've been wanting to do this the last 2 springs. And she had planned to do it when she graduated.
Right.
And that was spring of 2018.
Right.
And we were like, all right, well, we just kind of need to hold each other to this. And so we both just kind of started saving money. But it was sort of understood that like if something happened to either of us, that the other one would finish. Because I will just say it's like if you didn't get injured personally, someone you knew got injured and got off trail.
Absolutely. So this is luck as much as anything else, isn't it? The fact
I
that
think
both
it's
of you.
luck. I also just think people are crazy out there. Like people have something hurting, and the momentum, like the mentality out there, in any other like extreme athletics, like. You try and be intelligent about it, I think. And I don't think hikers get like kudos for being intelligent about it. It's like they'll just wear themselves out and get off trail.
Yeah.
It's brutal, but
it's tough. So you would actually consider doing this by yourself as well, would you, Luke?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. Well, look, we started with music from Cloud, and hopefully you're going to give me a link I can have of the 2 of you playing together. So I'm going to play that. If you have done that, by the way, I'll have to cut this if you haven't. But if you have done that,
we tried to
or you've been able to.
Actually, I think we should just send him. We have when we got to Franklin, we ended up in the middle of this interesting thing.
I think it's a mixed bag. I think it sounds bad. Sorry.
Well, I tell you what we do. We won't discuss it while I'm actually recording.
Okay.
So what we'll do, if we can get it, we'll play it. If we can't, we can't. But it's been lovely talking to you guys, and I'm really, really pleased you came on the show to chat with me. And thanks very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Mighty
thanks
Blue.
for having us.
Okay, guys, we'll take it easy, and hopefully we'll speak again sometime.
All right, for sure. Thanks.
Cheers. Bye. They really did their thing out there, didn't they? They were so carefree and completely relaxed about making miles or not making miles. Sadly, I wasn't able to get the audio they sent me into a format that worked for the podcast, but I'll try again next week if I can. I thought they were great guests, and they really were the most chilled out couple we've ever had on the podcast. But now, while I'm trying to work out the middle section of the show for future episodes of the podcast, let's hear from our hostess with the mostest, Julie Jester Gayheart. Julie's going to be the host of the latest show on the Hiking Radio Network, and I wanted to bring her on to tell us about the shape of the show and some important news. Let's hear from her. So I know that I've announced that we're going to be doing a new Section Hiker show called Jester Section Hiker, and I said that it's going to be available from the beginning of next year. Well, today we have Jester herself, Julie Gayheart, and Julie has got some exciting news for us. Hi, Julie. How are you?
I'm doing great, Steve. How are you doing?
I'm good. So what's going on with the show? Because I know you've been working hard.
Well, the show has taken a turn. Like you just said, originally we were planning to, interview some people, work on it, produce, get the show out in January. But because of the phenomenal response that we've had, we are able to move that up. And our first episode will debut December the 1st. And I think we're going to do the 1st. Yes, woohoo. And the 15th. And I am beyond excited. It's unbelievable, the people that have been emailing me and telling me their stories. And one of the things I've tried to do with each episode is kind of give it a theme.
Sure.
And I'll do a little precursor here. Our first episode, the theme is Good Times Kevin. So
I've been editing that one. He is good times, isn't he? He's awesome. Kevin is.
He's great, and once you guys listen to it, you'll know why it was important for me to actually have Kevin, also known as Purple Pilgrim. Everyone in his family still calls him Purple Pilgrim. You guys will understand why it was important for me to have him on as the first guest.
Yeah, so you said the response has been really, really good, and we're going to be starting on the 1st. It's going to be the 1st of every month and the 15th of every month. And so 2 episodes a month, but they'll hit on the 1st and the 15th. So make sure everybody downloads it, or they subscribe to it on iTunes or wherever it is you listen to your podcast. So tell us about the structure of the show, because we've talked about this before, and I know you've settled now on some sort of structure. What are you looking to do?
The structure itself, I didn't really know, and actually until I started talking to the guest. And the guest that you're going to hear actually helped me set the structure. First of all, we have an awesome theme song. For those of you that listened to Steve's podcast a couple weeks ago, there's a group out there called the Okie Dokie Brothers.
Great
name. And a friend of mine who actually I ended up doing a lot of hiking with in 15 and 16 when I was actually finishing the trail myself, she met the Okie Dokie Brothers when they were out on the trail near Damascus. Right. The brothers were out. They were doing a 30-day section, and they were actually writing songs on the trail at the shelters, asking input from hikers. And I want to save the rest of that because I'm actually going to have my friend on, and she's going to talk about the whole story about meeting the Okie Dokie Brothers and all that good stuff. So, and that song Through the Woods, I mean, I can listen to that song over and over and over again.
It's awesome. Well, you're going to have to.
So we're very excited about the theme song, and then we'll go right into the guest interview. And another surprise that happened was figuring out how to kind of end the guest interview. And we're going to be having the guest actually end the show. And part of that is going to be the guest is either going to read a journal entry, a quote, a statement from something that really means something to them about the trail.
Cool.
And it's been interesting to hear people read something they wrote 27 years ago, 15 years ago, what the trail meant to them, when they first started hiking. So it's very powerful. And our first episode was very powerful.
Yeah.
And then I'm really excited. our final segment of the show is going to be Let's Talk Gear. And we have, I guess, what I'm going to call a gear enthusiast speak to us for about 10 or 15 minutes about the first episodes. We get into what's called the big three. And for everybody out there that's into hiking, that's the backpack, the tent, and the sleeping bag. And it's actually kind of funny what we get into, but he really dives into what I call the logistics of gear, why you should buy certain things, materials, not just, hey, buy this because, it's hanging on the shelf, but how to get fitted depending on where you're hiking. And I learned a lot about sleeping bags I didn't even know myself. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, really.
Oh, cool.
The ratings and what, if it says 20 degrees, it may not really mean it's a 20-degree bag. And looking forward to you guys hearing about that. That's
cool. That sounds like a lovely show. And I haven't heard any of the gear things yet. I haven't edited any of those yet. So I'm looking forward to that. But to have that on there, because I know we talked about this before, Julie, that section hikers, I think, are the real stars of hiking because they have to do it new every single time. Us through hikers, once you've got your legs, you're good to go. But the section hikers love their gear, don't they?
They do love their gear. And one of the things that one of our guests talks about is the beauty of being a section hiker is being able to perfect that gear each time you go out.
Yes.
And being able to look back and laugh at yourself at what you used to do compared to what you do now.
Yeah. So have you enjoyed interviewing these guests? Have you worked out your own style? And before you answer, I can tell you that you have, because what you do, which I think is great, by the way, you introduce some of your own humor into it, and you're laughing and you're self-deprecating as I can be on the show as well, and you have fun with your guests, which I think is a really, really nice thing. So you seem very comfortable. Are you enjoying doing it?
I am really enjoying it. And one of the things that I'm enjoying is it's like you have the trail community via podcast, because things you talk about while you're hiking on the trail and things that happen on the trail, no one really understands that. And what I'm learning from people, and this is a huge compliment to the Hiking Radio Network and to your podcast, Steve, is I actually had a guy tell me last night he loved listening to when you went up to Katahdin because he could hear the waterfall. And that was very important.
Wow.
Very, very
How
important.
awesome.
Yeah. To him. And he said you made a comment that that might be noise in the background, but that's actually what he wanted to hear because it put him right on the trail with you. And for for section hikers, I think that's really important to have that in the podcast where the guest could put you somewhere maybe you've been or where you dream about going and give you that feeling that you have while you're on the trail, while you're actually back in your regular life working, taking care of family and those things.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm really pleased about that. Those responses are great. And do you still want people to reach out to you? Because I know you've been inundated, haven't you, with various messages.
I do. And I just ask for people's forgiveness because quite honestly, one of the things I want to do is I want to talk to as many people as possible. I want to if you want to be on the show and share your story, we will have you on the show and we'll share your story. You just got to give me time. I'm putting everybody in the queue, so to speak. And I don't want to turn anybody away. So yes, we want people to still reach out. And I want to mention too, that part of the gear talk, I kind of want to have that morph into a Q&A. So if you have questions about gear after you listen to the first couple episodes, please email me, and I'm sure we'll go over my email. And I would love to have Steve, who is actually our gear guy, answer your questions that you want to hear about on the show.
That'd be good. And you say he's quite an expert, and he's got a Facebook following as well, hasn't he?
He has quite a following. He has 3 Facebook pages. Uh-huh. The main Facebook page is called Backpacking Gear Flea Market. Uh-huh. And there's 67,000 members on the Backpacking Gear Flea Market.
Cool.
And then he has one that is very specific for backpacking gear reviews and frequently asked questions. And that one's got about 21,000 people. And then he's got another page called Trail Talk, where he wants people to put trip reports on there that are not from like the AT, Pacific Crest Trail, Continental Divide. It's
right.
Hey, I went out and hiked Zion National Park. I went out and hiked the Ozarks or whatever. So something that people can have and read that's separate from the big three. And he's got about 7,000 members on that.
Well, I'm sure we'll put links to those in the show notes once you start your show, because you'll be doing the show notes, not me, thankfully, when that all happens. So tell the people how they can get in touch with you then, Julie.
If they want to email me, they can email me at jesternc2212@gmail.com or on Instagram at Jester Hikes.
So that's Jester NC, standing for North Carolina, I presume.
North Carolina, yes.
JesterNC2212@gmail.com and Jester Hikes on Instagram.
That's it.
Okay. Well, look, I promise you, I'm so excited having listened and edited the first one. I've really enjoyed it. And I can tell everybody listening that Julie is a terrific host or hostess, and she's really going to, she's going to get your attention and really get you enthralled with what Section Hiking is all about. So we're delighted to have the chance to do that. So thanks for joining us, Julie, and we'll see you on the 1st of December.
Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it.
Take it easy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So the show's been brought forward a month. It's really been overwhelming how much support Julie's received. So I hope you're going to tune in the 1st and the 15th of every month, starting with December the 1st. I think you're really going to love it. And I just am so excited that we've got this gear section as well, because I know everybody wants to hear about gear, and I've never really worked out how to do it on my show. I think Julie's got the perfect person to do it, and I think it's going to be an excellent part of the podcast. On the subject of new shows, everybody who wrote into me about our Women of a Certain Age show have now been contacted, and I've spoken to a couple already. Soon I'll be introducing the person we're going to be going with, so stay tuned for that one as well. There's also one more show that I'm working on, and I hope to have definitive news about that in the next couple of weeks as well. Now, on to Hiking Through by Paul Stutzman, where a bike ride in Hot Springs brings schoolboy memories flooding back for Paul. I'll see you next week. Chapter 9. Let's go left. What a pleasure to start the next day with clear skies and trails free of snow and ice. For a week we were never quite certain which state we were in, since the trail wove along the North Carolina and Tennessee border. 1 hour we were hiking in our third state, and the next hour we dropped back to the second state we thought we had finished. At these lower levels, spring had already arrived. Our attention to the trail was constantly diverted by wildflowers of many species and colours. A solitary dandelion caught my eye, and I was delighted by its beauty. Most homeowners consider the lowly dandelion a nuisance, a plague to be stamped out. But out here, growing alone in the woods, this drop of sunshine was a thing of beauty, perhaps not as delicate as some of the woodland beauties, but almost indestructible. Surely the dandelion knows secrets of stubborn survival that the giant trees we had seen toppled in the Smokies did not. It was our 19th day on the Appalachian Trail. Our bodies were taking on hiker resiliency and stamina, but the difficulties in the Smokies had drained and wearied us. Almost 250 miles had passed under our shoes, and we needed a 0 day, a day of rest. The AT led through Hot Springs, 33 miles ahead of us, and we planned to take our first 0 day in that town, nestled in a mountain valley. The trail again went upward, climbing above 4,000 feet. Snowbird Mountain waited in the distance, and long before we reached its slopes we spotted a white, shimmering UFO that had landed on the mountaintop. It was a 5-mile climb to the summit, where we were prepared to meet the Little Green Men, but found only an unusual FAA tower perched atop the mountain. 9 more miles of climbing took us to the highest elevation of the day, Max Patch Mountain. This bald summit, covered by 350 grassy acres, is part of Pisgah National Forest and is a favourite spot for day hikers, picnickers and kite flyers. The AT traverses the top of the bald, and I felt as though I were on the mountain meadow with Julie Andrews singing in the sound of music. The 360-degree view of mountain ranges stretching to every horizon was even more impressive than I had imagined. I understood why Max Patch is called the crown jewel of the Appalachian Trail. That night would be the first full moon of my trek, and I imagined the joy of camping on the bald's meadow with a big moon shining above. Such a plan was impossible, though. The winds would have snatched our tents and transformed them into Max Patch's own unidentified flying objects. Roaring Fork Shelter was 1 mile farther and 1,000 feet lower, and we made that our destination. Sailor, Marathon Man and I reached the shelter at 4 o'clock and were the only hikers there. It seemed the perfect opportunity to try a plan we had been discussing. I wanted to do a night hike, travelling by the light of the moon. Since we were alone in the shelter, we could retire early, sleep until 3 in the morning, and then start our moonlit hike. An additional bonus to the plan was that we could knock off the last 18 miles to Hot Springs and arrive in town even earlier than we had hoped. But our plans quickly hit a snag. We unpacked and unrolled our sleeping bags. I was boiling water for my evening meal. Sailor sat in a corner reading the shelter register and catching up on trail happenings. "Hey fellas, there's a reason no one else is here. This shelter has bear problems." The register recounted the stories. A renegade bear had found his new food source in the packs hikers obligingly carried into the woods for him. The bear climbed the trees at night and knocked down food bags, eating everything, including toothpaste. One hiker noted the bear had even eaten his toothbrush, and if anyone could find a blue toothbrush in a pile of bear poop, yes, please return the toothbrush. The bear had paid a visit just the night before. One hiker awakened in the night, feeling a tug on his sleeping bag, and was jerked to full alertness when he realised a bear had his front paws on the shelter floor and was tugging at his sleeping bag. I was imagining the exciting story I could take home if we did indeed have a bear visit that night. Marathon Man instantly geared for flight. He had intense fear of bears. I was not quite as ready to run, but then I remembered a joke about several hunters being chased by a bear. One hunter turned to the other and said, "I don't have to run faster than the bear. I just need to run faster than you." Reality convinced me. I was hiking with a marathon runner and a marathon walker. It would be my rump the bear would be chasing. I had lost my interest in taking home a bear story. "Hey guys, let's get going." 3 more miles brought us to the site of the old Roaring Fork shelter. No longer in use, the shelter had a new name posted on a sign: "No camping permitted." Unusual name for a campsite, we thought, as we set up our tents. Still committed to a walk by the light of the moon, we rose at 4 in the morning and were soon on the trail. However, another minor glitch cracked our plan. The moon had vanished and a storm front was moving through, pushing heavy clouds. There was no moonlight for our moonlit walk. Only our headlamps led our way. The trail passed directly in front of the Walnut Mountain shelter, where 3 young hikers were awakened by a noise outside shortly after 4. They watched in amazement as 3 headlamps bobbed up and down through the darkness and disappeared down the trail. We were beginning to see notes in shelter registers about our group of 3. The hiking community had dubbed us the Early Riser Crew. Our moonlit hike started a day of descent from 4,260 feet in the mountains to the main street of Hot Springs in the valley at 1,325 feet. We walked into town at noon, hoping to stay at Elmer's, a famous hostel in town. Again we were disappointed. Elmer had no vacancy. The day was rainy with a forecast of more rain for the next few days, and many hikers were staying in town. We walked through the town looking for a good spot to take our 0 day, finally discovering a comfortable cottage beside a stream. We shed our gear and relaxed, enjoying the prospect of our rest day. At Bluff Mountain Outfitters, I weighed myself and found I had lost close to a pound for every day on the trail. At this rate, I would have finished my hike weighing about the same as my backpack. For the next day and a half, we rested and made numerous trips to both the Smoky Mountain Diner and the Paddler's Pub, in a quest to consume as many calories as possible. At both eateries, I sat and watched, enjoying the atmosphere and the interaction between employees and customers. I did miss my old life at the restaurant. The 0 day rejuvenated us, and we were eager to get back on the trail. One last meal at the Smoky Mountain Diner filled us with a huge breakfast and enough caffeine to propel us over any mountain. White blazes led us through town, over railroad tracks and along the road for a short stretch. A bridge took us over the French Broad River. Then we lost the trail. Back and forth we went along the road looking for that elusive white marker. We finally resorted to checking our thru-hiker handbook and found that immediately after the bridge, the trail dove over the guardrail and down an embankment to wind along the river. Even after nearly 3 weeks of watching our blazes, we had missed the path. After following the river for a short distance, the trail climbed again. It was a wonderful day to hike. The rain had stopped and the sun was breaking through the fog as we hiked through Pump Gap. Spring was bursting out around us. Trees showed hints of fresh green and wildflowers bloomed in abundance. Yes, this was indeed better than any day at work. Several miles into the morning, we stopped and dropped our gear. Sailor and Marathon Man rested against a fallen log, and I stretched out on the ground, head on my pack. Just to my right, a cluster of the little white-fringed phacelias fluttered in the breeze, waving at me. I watched them lazily, and then was suddenly gripped by the feeling. Many years ago, Mary found our youngest daughter, aged 3, sitting in the foliage of a large potted plant I had been nurturing for years. When her mother asked why she was sitting in the middle of Daddy's plant, our little girl replied, "I just got the feeling." Now I understood what had happened to her that day. Watching those delicate flowers sway in the sunshine, I was seized with curiosity. How would they taste? Checking to make certain my friends were not watching, I reached over, plucked one bloom and popped it into my mouth. That day I started my own trail tradition of munching a sample whenever I discovered any new wildflower. At a road crossing later in the day, we found a notice nailed to a post. Any hiker was welcome to a meal at the house half a mile down the road. We followed the directions to a lovely log home. The husband and wife team had thru-hiked themselves several years before, and the trail had worked its magic on them. They purchased this home and made it their Christian mission to witness to hikers. We were presented with conversation on good old-fashioned Bible Belt salvation. This was no problem to me. I'd heard this all my life. 3 weeks into my hike, I would have been willing to walk barefoot through 15 feet of burning embers for a good home-cooked meal, and the meal was good. Homemade waffles and pork stew and all the Coke I could drink, topped off with an ice cream brownie sundae. I might even have done 30 feet of burning embers for that meal. 7 hikers dined at the table in the log home, Motormouth among them. We had met him before, hiking with 2 other men, all in their 20s. Motormouth's name was well-deserved. He never shut up, except when he coughed, which he seemed to do almost as much as he talked. He claimed his lungs had been damaged by a harrowing trip on bad drugs taken while he was in Mexico. Among the 7 of us, there was quite a diversity of religious opinions. We covered everything from reincarnation to agnosticism. Our host asked thought-provoking questions about the existence of God, and Motormouth seemed to have all the answers. His parents had enrolled him in a Jesuit school for many years. I was content to let him run on unhindered, since it gave me more time to enjoy my ice cream sundae. Our hosts even shared books with us. We were encouraged to take a book along on the condition that we would read it. I declined. I didn't want the extra weight, and I had already read many of them. Motormouth, though, did choose one and packed it away. On the way back to the trail, we crossed the North Carolina-Tennessee line. We had actually hiked out of state to get that free meal. 2 more miles brought us to Little Laurel Shelter, where we hung our bear bags and went to bed. We had not gone far the next morning when we came to a fence running through the woods, and hanging from a nail on the top board was Motormouth's book in a plastic bag. Was he a speed reader, or had he sat up all night reading with his headlamp? We drew other conclusions, since the book was in perfect condition, looking as if no one had ever opened it. Our next goal was to reach Erwin, Tennessee, in 3 days. This would require some serious hiking. We worked our way through several difficult rock climbs. White Rock Cliffs was the most strenuous and unforgettable. The path was a difficult mile of climbing over and through jagged white rocks, running along a ridge that gave us views into Tennessee on one side and North Carolina on the other. If it hadn't been such work, that mile would have been a spectacularly beautiful stroll. We had decided to hike several miles past Bald Mountain Shelter before camping for the night, so that our destination at Erwin would be within reach the next day. But late in the afternoon we met a trail maintainer busy with repair work. His backpack was overly large and lay nearby. We stopped to chat about his work and this section of the trail, and he told us that his pack held soft drinks, bananas, bratwurst and little debbies. He was planning a cookout that night for anyone staying at Bald Mountain Shelter, a mile down the path. Our plans immediately changed. We arrived at the shelter, bearing the good news of the cookout to hikers already settling in for the night. Delicious food and an unexpected party lifted everyone's spirits, and it was an unusually pleasant shelter stay. Much too early in the morning I felt the tug on my sleeping bag, and my startled yet sleepy mind could only think, could that pair of tractors hear? But it was only Marathon Man with our wake-up call. Go away! Can't I just have 1 more hour of rest? But he did not relent. We rolled out, assembling our gear quickly and quietly by the light of our headlamps. We were at an elevation of over 5,000 feet until we reached Little Bald in early morning light. After that, it was all downhill, a 16-mile descent that would take us to Erwin, Tennessee. By mid-morning, we were only a few miles away from our destination and caught great views of the town below us and the Nolichucky River winding through the valley. At noon, the trail abruptly deposited us on River Road, less than 100 feet from Uncle Johnny's Nolichucky hostel. We booked a small cabin for the night and headed for hot showers. Food was the next item on our agenda, and we caught a shuttle from the hostel to an all-you-can-eat pizza place with a salad bar. For the second time in a week, I ate my greens. Later in the afternoon, Sailor and I set out to find the post office and a pharmacy. I'd bounced my food supply box here from Hot Springs, and Sailor needed supplies to treat his blisters that were growing to monstrous proportions. At the hostel, we had noticed a number of bikes left in a rack for hikers to use whenever they wished. I concluded that Irwin must not have any problems with crime, since such a row of unattended, unlocked bicycles could be a tempting target. After hiking over 300 miles, we thought a bike ride would be a welcome change from walking. We borrowed small day packs from the hostel and headed for the bike rack. It was soon obvious why these bikes were safe. Any thief stealing one of these bikes would never be able to reach speeds high enough for a getaway. In fact, he might possibly return the bike and lodge a complaint. My bike was stuck in fifth gear, so it took some gusto to get rolling. Sailor's bike broke down a half mile from the hostel, and he had to push it back and choose another. Once I got my bike up to speed, I felt like lightning on two wheels. Still, I arrived at the post office only 5 minutes before closing time. I tore open my box and grabbed what I thought I would need in the next 8 days. "You have 1 minute left," said an ominous voice from behind the counter. "I want to send this box to Damascus, Virginia," I said, hastily repacking and closing the box with the precious minute ticking away. "If you send it first class, I'll tape it for you," said the voice. I handed over the box with payment. The closed sign hit the door at the same time I did. I pedalled down the street, met Sailor at the pharmacy, and we headed back to the hostel. My bike slowly cranked up to speed, and as I was opening up the throttle on the bike path between the railroad tracks and I-26, I was reliving another bike ride on a fateful night long ago. My friend was 14 and I was 15. We had pedalled our bikes down the long dirt lane to my uncle's old farmhouse for a sleepover with my cousin. At 11 that night, we were still wide awake and full of youthful energy. My friend suggested a night bike ride. Agreeing that a ride through the dark countryside might be exciting, we all pedalled back out the driveway to the quiet country road. Overhead, a gibbous moon was shining brightly. We stopped at the intersection of the lane and the country road, debating which way to turn. To the right, the road lay level and easy. To the left, we'd have a hard climb up a steep hill, but the ride back down would be free and exhilarating. My friend's words still ring in my ears. "Let's go left." Almost a mile later, we stopped at the top of the hill, panting from the climb. We paused to catch our breath, then turned our bicycles and with a rush of excitement headed back down the hill. Near the bottom of the hill, something suddenly went wrong. My friend was no longer beside me. We had just crossed a bridge, and he had vanished. A cry for help came from somewhere in the darkness below the bridge. My friend's bike had veered off the road and he'd lost control on the gravel berm. While we flew across the bridge, he and his bike had gone down the bank, the momentum carrying him completely across the little stream and smashing him into the wooden retaining wall on the opposite side. He stumbled up toward the road and we saw blood covering his face, running from a gash above his eye. His bike was mangled beyond driving, so we positioned him on the front of my cousin's handlebars and carefully drove up the long driveway back to the farmhouse. My uncle rushed us to the local hospital, but during the night my friend slipped into a coma and was transferred to a larger facility. I was able to visit him only once, briefly, since he was unconscious and on life support. For the next 2 days I prayed harder than I had ever prayed before. I begged and pleaded with God to let my friend live. I imagine I literally prayed without ceasing, as the scriptures tell us to do. It was unthinkable that God would not heal him. I even offered God a deal. If he would let my friend live, I vowed I would become a missionary. This was the absolute sacrifice for me. I had often heard missionaries speak about their work and had long ago come to the conclusion that mission work was not for me. Leaving friends and family to travel to another country to preach to people who didn't wear any clothes would be the worst possible life I could imagine. Yet I was willing to do this if only God would let my friend live. My father was the one who told me my friend had died. "It's not possible," I sobbed. "How could God let that happen?" I'd never before known such anguish or felt so betrayed. One small, seemingly inconsequential decision, let's go left. My friend was far too young to die, and I was too young to grapple with thoughts of life after death and the sovereignty of God. The only certainty I knew was that when I had needed God, he didn't seem to be available. A blaring car horn jolted me away from the painful ride through my memories. We were almost back to the hostel, and my hands had been a death grip on the handlebars. I'd once again been racing down that hill under a huge shining moon. Choices. We make hundreds of them every day, each decision holding the potential to lead to pain or pleasure, joy or despair. That one left turn, taken so early in my life, had an effect that still rippled through my whole being many years later. Is God in control of our lives? That question had taken root in my mind when I was 15, the consequence of an innocent moonlit bike ride. The question still whispered to me now, decades later, in the mountains of North Carolina.